Remember that scene in The Purge where the family opens their security gate because someone's screaming for help, and it turns out to be bait for a coordinated home invasion? Well, congratulations. You just had that exact moment, except instead of Hollywood survival horror with convenient plot armor, it's 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and your hand is already reaching for the deadbolt because your mammalian brain heard distress and override every logical circuit in your skull. But here's the plot twist the neighborhood watch meetings didn't warn you about. The real threat isn't outside your door. It's the 4 million-year-old biological programming that's about to get you killed. Your amygdala, that ancient reptilian cluster of neurons responsible for fight or flight responses, processes emotional stimuli 200 milliseconds faster than your prefrontal cortex can engage rational thought. Translation: your body is already moving toward that door before your brain finishes the sentence. Wait, should I actually? 12 hours ago, you were scrolling through TikTok debating whether oat milk is really milk. Now you're living in a real-life episode of Criminal Minds, except the behavioral analysis unit isn't coming and you're about to become a case study in why humans are spectacularly bad at threat assessment when operating on sleep deprivation and evolutionary autopilot. The uncomfortable truth: you have approximately 3.7 seconds between hearing that sound and making a decision that determines whether you're filing a police report or becoming one. That's not hyperbole, that's neuroscience. Cold, unforgiving, peer-reviewed neuroscience measuring average human reaction time under stress conditions. Rule 0: your front door was never a barrier, it was a decision point. The difference between walls and boundaries is that walls are physical and boundaries are psychological, and every home invasion, every violent crime, every tragedy that starts with "I just opened the door to check" began the exact same way, with someone believing their curiosity outranked their survival instinct. Your deadbolt didn't just become as useful as asking Siri for relationship advice. It became the last functional piece of technology between you and a variable you cannot control. And you're about to voluntarily deactivate it because something out there knows exactly which sounds trigger the helper response hardwired into your central nervous system. Here's what you're going to learn: the 6 critical mistakes that transform concerned citizens into statistics, the acoustic manipulation tactics that exploit your neurobiology, the physics of forced entry that makes every second of delay exponentially valuable, the game theory of predator-prey dynamics when the prey opens the cage voluntarily, and the brutal mathematics of why opening your door at 2 a.m. has a lower survival rate than ignoring a stranded motorist in a horror movie. Because in the next 6 sections, we're going to surgically dismantle every instinct telling you to be helpful, every social conditioning that makes you feel guilty for not responding, and every Disney Channel delusion that good intentions protect you from bad outcomes. Time's up, survivor. Psychology class is in session, and the pop quiz is pass or die. Section 1. The acoustic manipulation. Your auditory cortex just became as useful as a smoke detector that only works after the house burns down. Here's why. Sound processing in the human brain follows a hierarchical pathway where emotional valence gets assigned before conscious recognition occurs. When you hear crying, screaming, or distress vocalizations at 2 a.m., your superior temporal gyrus lights up like a Christmas tree, triggering an automatic empathy response that floods your system with oxytocin and cortisol simultaneously. Remove rational oversight from this biochemical cascade and you've essentially performed surgery on decision-making capacity without anesthesia, and every threat assessment mechanism starts hemorrhaging simultaneously. The pattern is devastatingly simple. Someone is crying, someone is pleading, someone sounds injured, lost, confused, or desperate. Maybe it's a woman's voice because statistically, female distress vocalizations trigger stronger helping responses across all demographics. Maybe it's a child because the evolutionary imperative to protect offspring overrides virtually every other survival calculation. Maybe it's your neighbor's name being called because social familiarity creates perceived safety. And there you are, sleep-deprived, disoriented, wearing pajamas that definitely aren't tactical gear, about to perform the single most statistically lethal action available to you. Congratulations, you just became the opening scene in a true crime documentary. Studies from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit show that 73% of successful home invasions preceded by acoustic manipulation involve distress sounds lasting between 30 and 90 seconds. That's the sweet spot. Too short and you don't fully engage. Too long and you start questioning authenticity. The professional criminal, and yes, we're talking about professionals now, not opportunistic junkies, understands this timing with surgical precision. They're not outside your door improvising. They're executing a protocol that's been A/B tested on your neighbors. Most people open the door because mirror neurons in the premotor cortex fire when observing or hearing distress, creating a neurological illusion that you're experiencing the pain yourself. Reality check. You're not experiencing anything except the biological con job that kept our species alive when saber-toothed cats were the primary threat and strangers were usually tribe members. In 2025, strangers at 2 a.m. operate under different mathematics. But here's what the personal safety seminars don't tell you. The real killer isn't the initial sound, it's the escalation pattern designed to override your hesitation. First, you hear distress, you pause, then you hear it intensify. Maybe banging starts, maybe the voice gets more desperate, maybe you hear what sounds like someone trying other doors. Now your brain is processing threat multiplication. If I don't help, something worse will happen, versus if I don't help, I'm complicit in harm. Welcome to Game Theory in Practice, where cooperation sounds great in college ethics courses, but predatory tactics make everyone play defect. You know how in The Strangers, the masked invaders just stand there knocking because they understand psychological warfare better than physical warfare? Real-life home invasion tactics are actually more sophisticated. The film makes it look random and chaotic. Reality check. It's behavioral economics weaponized against your central nervous system. The sound isn't random, the timing isn't accidental, the emotional pitch isn't organic. It's acoustic engineering designed to hack the same neural pathways that make you cry during Pixar movies. First, acknowledge reality. Your ears are not reliable threat assessment tools at 2 a.m. Your emotional processing system is operating in degraded mode after 11 hours of consciousness shutdown, and every instinct you have is calibrated for a world that stopped existing around the time we invented agriculture. Do not approach the door. Do not call out. Do not turn on exterior lights to get a better look. Every action you take telegraphs your position, your state of awareness, and your decision-making process to whoever is staging this performance. The scientific method solution works because of acoustic physics and information asymmetry. Sound travels through doors and walls, but visual confirmation requires line of sight. Your first move, activate your phone's camera or any recording device and begin documenting timestamp, audio, and duration. The act of recording shifts your brain from emotional processing to analytical processing. It's like giving bacteria a lethal sunburn. You're using documentation as psychological UV radiation to damage the empathy response that's currently hijacking your prefrontal cortex. No smartphone? Voice recorder? Fine. Grab a notebook and physically write down what you're hearing with timestamps. This isn't journaling therapy nonsense. This is actual survival neuroscience. The motor cortex activation required for writing engages different neural networks than emotional processing, creating interference that dampens the automatic helping response. Simultaneously, you're creating evidence that becomes legally valuable later when you're explaining to law enforcement why you didn't open the door while someone was allegedly dying on your porch. But here's the survival hack nobody talks about. Install a video doorbell or exterior camera system that records to cloud storage automatically. Not because you'll watch it in real time, you won't, because that creates the same emotional engagement problem, but because the existence of visible recording equipment changes predator calculations. Statistical analysis of deterrent effectiveness shows that visible cameras reduce targeted selection by 67% compared to properties without surveillance. You're not trying to catch criminals, you're trying to make them select easier prey. Priority hierarchy for response options in order of preference. 1. Do absolutely nothing and document everything. 2. Call 911 from inside your locked home and report suspicious activity without opening the door. 3. If you have a genuine relationship with neighbors, call them to verify if the distress is legitimate. 4. Use a doorbell camera or window position that provides visual confirmation without creating vulnerability. 5. And this is only if you've exhausted all other options and genuinely believe someone's life is at risk. Crack the door with security chain engaged while maintaining defensive positioning behind a hard barrier. 6. Never. There is no number 6. Those are your options. Choose wrong and you've just volunteered for a statistics column. But acoustic manipulation is only half the battle. The sounds outside are designed to make you ignore the real threat, the vulnerability you create the moment that deadbolt turns. Section 2. The physics of forced entry. Your deadbolt just became as useful as a chocolate teapot in a volcano. Here's the uncomfortable physics lesson. Standard residential door frames are attached to wall studs with screws that penetrate approximately 0.75 to 1 inch into wood. A trained adult male can generate roughly 1,500 pounds of force with a proper kick technique. Your door frame, that decorative piece of pine trim surrounding your entrance, typically fails at around 400 to 600 pounds of force applied to the lock mechanism. Do the mathematics. Your security theatre just got a terminal diagnosis and the prognosis is measured in seconds, not minutes. The cascade effect is surgically precise. First impact point, the strike plate where your deadbolt extends into the frame. Standard strike plates are held by 2 screws. Each may be 0.75 inches long, penetrating into soft pine that splits like kindness under focused kinetic energy. The frame splinters. The door swings inward. Total elapsed time from first kick to full breach, 2.3 seconds for amateurs, 1.1 seconds for professionals. And there you are, standing 3 feet from your now open doorway because you were trying to assess the situation, about to discover that assessment time and response time are not the same calculation. Congratulations, you just became a statistics demonstration in why distance equals time equals options, and you have none of the above. Hour 2 of your home invasion, you're realizing that every cop show you've ever watched lied about door strength. Studies from insurance industry forced entry testing reveal that 89% of exterior residential doors can be breached with 3 kicks or fewer when using proper technique targeting the lock cylinder area. 3 kicks, that's roughly 4 seconds of noise. Your neighbor sleeping through their white noise machine isn't waking up. Your Ring doorbell is capturing excellent footage that will be very useful for the investigation afterward. Your 911 call is being routed to dispatch where the average response time for your suburban neighborhood is 8 to 12 minutes. You have 4 seconds of warning before the physics equation resolves in someone else's favor. Most people install deadbolts because security consultants tell them to, creating the psychological illusion of protection through incremental improvement. Reality check. A deadbolt on a standard residential frame is like putting a titanium lock on a cardboard box. The lock isn't the failure point. The frame is the failure point. The door itself is the failure point. The hinges are the failure point. You've secured one component in a chain of 5 failure modes, and physics doesn't grade on effort. But here's what the home security industry doesn't tell you. The real killer isn't inadequate locks, it's inadequate time. Every second of delay between first impact and full breach is worth exponentially more than any second after breach occurs. Before the door opens, you have options. Retreat to secondary defense position, arm yourself, barricade interior rooms, complete your 911 call with actionable information. After the door opens, you have reaction time measured in neurological processing speed versus physical approach speed, and unless you've trained for violent confrontation under adrenal stress, spoiler alert, you haven't. You're operating on the same biological firmware that makes people freeze during car accidents. You know how in Home Alone, Kevin sets up elaborate traps and the burglars keep coming through the front door like it's a revolving entrance to a slapstick factory? Yeah, that's cute, until you realize that real forced entry doesn't give you setup time, doesn't involve cartoon physics, and doesn't pause for witty one-liners. Reality check. Kevin McAllister would have been killed in the first 30 seconds by any remotely competent home invader, and his trap-building montage only works because the script gave him 8 hours of prep time. You have 0 seconds of prep time because you're learning about door physics while someone's testing your door physics. First, acknowledge reality. Your door is not a barrier. It's a time purchase mechanism, and standard residential installation gives you approximately 2 to 4 seconds of purchase time. That's not enough time to do anything useful, except realize you needed more time. Immediate action for anyone who owns their residence. Replace every screw in your strike plate and hinge plates with 3-inch deck screws that penetrate through the frame trim and into the actual wall stud. You're not making the lock stronger, you're making the failure point require 1,200 to 1,800 pounds of force instead of 400 pounds. That's the difference between 1 kick and 4 kicks. That's the difference between 2 seconds and 8 seconds. That's the difference between no options and maybe you can do something. The scientific method solution works because of materials science and load distribution. Standard door frames concentrate force at 2 points, the strike plate and the hinge side. When force exceeds material yield strength, catastrophic failure occurs at the weakest point. Reinforcement plates, steel security plates that span 6 inches vertically, distribute impact force across a wider area of the frame, requiring multiple simultaneous failure points instead of single-point failure. It's like the difference between punching drywall and punching concrete. The energy doesn't disappear, it just requires more energy input to achieve the same result. Install a door reinforcement kit rated for 1,000 plus pounds of force. This isn't more Ninja tactical operator nonsense. This is actual structural engineering applied to residential architecture. No ability to modify your rental property door frame. Fine. Focus on secondary barriers and defense-in-depth strategy. Every interior door between your front entrance and your bedroom becomes the additional time purchase mechanism. Bedroom door gets the same 3-inch screw treatment on a smaller scale. Install a physical door brace or security bar that wedges under the handle and against the floor, requiring lifting force in addition to horizontal force to breach. You're not building a fortress, you're building a maze of time costs that make your residence less attractive than the house next door that has none of these features. But here's the survival hack nobody talks about. The strongest door security isn't the door. It's making them not want to test your door. Install motion-activated exterior lighting with overlapping coverage zones. Trim vegetation that provides concealment near entry points. Make forced entry attempts occur in illuminated spaces visible from the street. Statistical analysis from residential burglary studies shows that criminals spend an average of 60 seconds assessing target locations before attempting entry. If your property signals this will be loud, visible, and time-consuming, you've just made someone else's house the path of least resistance. Darwin doesn't care about fairness. Evolution operates through differential survival rates, and you're trying to survive by making someone else fail the fitness test. Priority hierarchy for door security in order of effectiveness. 1. Door reinforcement kit with strike plate, hinge plates, and frame reinforcement rated for 1,000 plus pounds. 2. 3-inch screws replacing all standard installation screws in frame components. 3. Solid core door instead of hollow core interior grade garbage. 4. Security camera with visible placement and cloud recording. 5. Motion-activated exterior lighting. 6. Secondary barriers on interior doors. 7. Never thinking your standard door is adequate. Those are your layers. Stack them. Because the person testing your door at 2 a.m. isn't going to stop after the first failure point if they're committed to entry. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a stupid way to die when you've survived this far, but forced entry through an inadequate door when you had months to reinforce it, that's not survival failure. That's planning failure. And Darwin doesn't grade on whether you meant to prepare better eventually. But Dr. Physics is only half the equation. The real nightmare starts when you realize that opening your door voluntarily bypasses every single second you could have purchased. Section 3. The Game Theory Nightmare. Your empathy just became as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Here's the brutal economics. Predator-prey dynamics operate on cost-benefit analysis, where prey behavior determines predator strategy. When potential victims signal willingness to engage with strangers during vulnerable hours, they've essentially posted a billboard advertising soft target available for exploitation. Remove the social consequences that govern daylight interactions, and you've essentially performed surgery on civilization without anesthesia, and every cooperative assumption that makes society function starts hemorrhaging simultaneously. The scenario is playing out right now. It's 2:17 a.m. You hear banging on your door accompanied by a woman's voice saying she's been in a car accident and her phone is dead. She needs to call for help. She sounds genuinely distressed. Maybe she is genuinely distressed. Maybe she's the bait in a two-person operation where her male partner is positioned out of your doorbell camera's field of view, waiting for the door to open so he can force entry before you can react. And there you are, weighing moral obligations against survival calculus, about to discover that the trolley problem isn't a philosophy thought experiment when you're standing on the tracks. Congratulations, you just became a demonstration of why game theory in practice looks nothing like game theory in textbooks. Week 1 of your recovery, assuming you survive to have a recovery period. Statistical analysis of home invasions involving deception tactics shows that 67% utilize female accomplices or female voice recordings, specifically because victim response rates to female distress are 3.2 times higher than response to male distress across all demographic groups. This isn't speculation. This is documented behavioral economics weaponized against your mammalian brain's hardwired gender-based threat assessment protocols. The person at your door might be in genuine distress, They also might be a professional actor in an operation that selected your address based on visible vulnerability indicators like single-car driveways, lack of exterior cameras, or previous friendly interactions that signal cooperative personality type. Most people open the door because the social cost of ignoring genuine distress feels higher than the statistical risk of encountering a threat. Reality check. Social cost is imaginary. Physical harm is actual. You're weighing a hypothetical guilt feeling against a non-hypothetical violent outcome, and your brain is telling you the imaginary consequence matters more. This is the cognitive bias that gets people killed. Welcome to game theory in practice, where cooperation sounds great when everyone plays cooperate, but one defector in the system means everyone who plays cooperate becomes a resource for everyone who plays defect. But here's what the neighborhood watch meetings don't tell you. The real killer isn't the initial deception, it's the escalation obligation that follows. You crack the door to assess the situation. Now you're in visual contact. Now they can see you're alone, unarmed, wearing pajamas, and clearly haven't called 911 yet because you're still trying to determine if this is legitimate. They've just gathered intelligence on your defensive capacity, and it's zero. Your decision to partially cooperate gave them the information they needed to calculate whether full aggression is viable. You wanted to be helpful. You became a threat assessment opportunity. You know how in The Gift, the creepy guy keeps showing up with presents and escalating boundary violations because he's testing response thresholds to see what level of intrusion gets tolerated. Real-life predatory behavior is actually more systematic. The film makes it look psychological and personal. Reality check. It's operational planning. The first boundary test isn't the goal, it's the reconnaissance. They're not trying to get in your house with the first knock. They're trying to determine if you're the type of person who opens the door when strangers knock at 2 a.m. If you are, you've just self-selected into the target pool. First, acknowledge reality. Your moral obligation to help strangers does not include creating vulnerability that enables harm to yourself. This is not selfishness. This is basic risk management. If someone is genuinely in distress at 2 a.m., you can help them by calling 911 from inside your locked home and reporting their location. Emergency services exist specifically for this scenario. You are not emergency services. You are a civilian in pajamas with no training in threat assessment, first aid, or crisis intervention. Your help is worth approximately nothing compared to professional emergency response, and your vulnerability is worth everything to someone exploiting your willingness to help. The scientific method solution works because of information asymmetry and game theory principles. The person outside your door has more information than you do. They know whether they're legitimate or a threat. You don't. In any scenario where one party has complete information and the other party has incomplete information, the party with incomplete information should never voluntarily increase their vulnerability. Call 911, give the dispatcher the address, report that someone is requesting help at your door at current time, then let dispatch handle it. If it's legitimate, help arrives. If it's not legitimate, you've created a police response that makes the threat calculation unfavorable for the predator. It's like using documentation as a weapon. You're turning their tactic into evidence that increases their operational cost. No working phone, no cell service, fine. The answer is still, do not open the door. Shout through the door that you're calling authorities and cannot provide direct assistance. If they're legitimate, they'll wait for police or move to a neighbor's house. If they're not legitimate, they'll move to an easier target. You're not refusing to help. You're refusing to become a victim while attempting to help. These are not the same ethical calculation, but here's the survival hack nobody talks about. The strongest defense against social engineering is pre-committing to a protocol before you're in the situation. Decide right now, while you're reading this and your amygdala isn't flooded with stress hormones, that you will never open your door to strangers between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. under any circumstances. No exceptions, no special cases, no, but what if it's really scenarios? Make the decision now so you don't have to make it while someone's crying on your porch. This is the same principle that makes advanced directives work in medical contexts. You're overriding future emotional state with current rational state. Priority hierarchy for response to distress calls at your door. 1. Call 911 immediately and report the situation without opening your door. 2. Announce loudly that you're calling authorities but cannot open the door. 3. If they claim to need phone access, offer to make a call on their behalf while they remain outside. 4. Document everything with video or audio recording. 5. Remain inside until police arrive to verify the situation. 6. Never open the door to assess whether someone looks threatening. Threat assessment based on appearance is how people get killed by threats that don't look like threats. The mathematics are unforgiving. Every home invasion that begins with, "I just wanted to help," ends with, "I should have called 911 instead." The guilt of not helping a stranger is survivable. The consequences of helping a predator are not. But game theory and door physics are just the mechanical threats. The real horror is what comes next when you realize you've already violated every principle that keeps you alive. Section 4. The recognition trap. Your memory just became as useful as asking ChatGPT for medical diagnoses during a heart attack. Here's why. Voice recognition in the human brain operates through the superior temporal sulcus, which processes vocal patterns, cadence, and emotional tone to create identity matching. The system works brilliantly for face-to-face interactions in daylight with visual confirmation. Remove visual data and add acoustic distortion from doors, walls, and stress vocalization, and you've essentially performed surgery on pattern recognition without anesthesia, and every certainty you have about, "I know that voice," starts hemorrhaging simultaneously. The pattern is devastatingly elegant. It's 2:34 a.m. You hear banging, then you hear what sounds exactly like your neighbor Tom from 3 houses down. He's saying his name. He sounds panicked. Maybe he mentions the street name or some detail that confirms local knowledge. He needs help because there's been a break-in at his house or a medical emergency with his wife, or his car broke down and he walked here because yours was the closest house. And there you are, sleep-deprived, processing information through a brain running on maybe 40% capacity, weighing whether Tom would really be at your door at 2:34 a.m. versus whether you're being paranoid about your actual neighbor who's actually in distress. Congratulations, you just discovered that deepfake technology isn't the only way to spoof identity, and your auditory cortex has about as much security as a Facebook password from 2009. Day 3 of the investigation. Police are explaining that the voice at your door was either a recording obtained from social media videos, a voice impersonation by someone who studied your neighbor's speech patterns, or, in the most sophisticated operations, AI-generated voice cloning requiring just 30 seconds of sample audio to produce convincing real-time output. Studies from cybersecurity research into social engineering show that voice-based identity fraud has increased 347% since 2021, specifically because humans trust auditory patterns with the same confidence they use to trust visual identification. Tom was asleep in his own house 3 doors down the entire time. The person at your door knew Tom's name because they surveilled your neighborhood and observed interaction patterns. They knew your address because you posted your Ring doorbell camera footage on the neighborhood Facebook group showing Tom bringing over the package that was delivered to his house by mistake. Most people open the door for familiar voices because recognition creates the illusion of safety through social connection. Reality check. Recognition is a pattern matching algorithm running on unreliable hardware with no verification protocol. You think you know Tom's voice. You've heard Tom's voice maybe 40 times in outdoor conversations, shouted greetings, and that one time he helped you jumpstart your car. Your brain has constructed a voice profile from approximately 6 minutes of total audio data, and now you're betting your life that the acoustic pattern you're hearing through a wooden door at 2 a.m. with someone deliberately stress modulating their vocal tone matches that profile within acceptable margins of error. This is the cognitive shortcut that makes people wire their life savings to scammers who sound like their grandson. But here's what the cybersecurity experts don't tell you. The real killer isn't voice mimicry, it's social proof stacking. They don't just use Tom's voice, they mention Tom's wife's name. They reference the blue Honda in Tom's driveway. They know Tom works the night shift on Thursdays because they watched him leave. They've layered verifiable details that pass your internal consistency check, and each detail makes the next detail feel more legitimate until your brain stops questioning whether this is actually Tom and starts problem solving how to help Tom. You wanted verification. You got a Wikipedia page of accurate information delivered in convincing audio format. Neither of those things proves the person outside is who they claim to be. You know how in Mission Impossible, they're constantly wearing those realistic masks and using voice modulators to infiltrate secure facilities, and it works because security guards make visual identification and move on. Real-life social engineering is actually more effective because it doesn't require Hollywood-quality masks. Reality check. It requires 30 seconds of audio scraped from your neighbor's Facebook video where he's giving a testimonial for his roofing contractor, run through free voice cloning software, and played through a smartphone speaker outside your door. The film makes it look high-tech and expensive. Real life makes it look like a Tuesday afternoon project for anyone with basic technical literacy. First, acknowledge reality. Auditory recognition without visual confirmation is not reliable identity verification. Period. Full stop. End of threat model. If someone claims to be your neighbor, your relative, your co-worker, or anyone else you know, and they're at your door at an unusual hour requesting entry, you verify through independent channels before you ever consider opening that door. This isn't paranoia. This is basic operational security applied to physical space. The scientific method solution works because of multi-factor authentication principles. Voice is one factor. Visual identification is a second factor. Independent verification through a trusted communication channel is a third factor. You need at least two factors before you escalate response. Call the person they claim to be using a known phone number, not a number they give you through the door, but the number already in your phone. If Tom is actually at your door, Tom will answer his phone and confirm he's at your door. If Tom is asleep in his house, Tom will answer confused and you've just discovered you're being targeted. If the phone goes to voicemail, you call 911 and report that someone is impersonating your neighbor at your door. It's like using two-factor authentication for your bank account, except the account is your life and you can't reset the password after fraud occurs. No phone access, no known contact information? Fine. Verify through visual confirmation that doesn't require opening the door. Look through a window from an angle that doesn't expose you to the doorway. Use your doorbell camera if you have one. If you don't have visual confirmation capability, do not open the door. Instead, announce that you're verifying their identity and will call police to assist. If they're legitimate, they'll wait. If they're not legitimate, they'll leave. You're not being rude, you're being alive. But here's the survival hack nobody talks about. Establish a duress code word with your actual neighbors, family members, and anyone who might legitimately need emergency access to your residence. Something innocuous that wouldn't be obvious to an observer, but that signals, this is actually me and I'm actually in trouble. The word has to be something that wouldn't appear in casual conversation or social media. Agree on the protocol in advance. If I ever show up at your door at an unusual hour, I'll use the code word within the first 30 seconds. If you don't hear it, assume I'm compromised or it's not me. This is the same principle that makes military authentication protocols work. You're creating a verification layer that can't be spoofed by observation alone. Priority hierarchy for identity verification at your door. 1. Call the person they claim to be using known contact information. 2. Use video doorbell or window to confirm visual identity from protected position. 3. Request use of pre-established duress code word. 4. Call 911 to report impersonation attempt if verification fails. 5. Never open the door based solely on voice recognition. 6. Never assume that knowing details about someone's life proves they are that person. Criminals do research. Wikipedia exists. Facebook exists. People post their entire lives online where surveillance is free and comprehensive. The mathematics are clinical. Voice recognition has a false positive rate of approximately 12 to 18% under ideal conditions. Add stress, acoustic distortion, deliberate mimicry, or AI generation, and that error rate climbs above 40%. Those aren't odds you survive by betting on. Those are odds that make Russian roulette look like good risk management. But voice mimicry is just a psychological attack vector. The physical nightmare waiting behind that door makes every other threat look like a practice drill. Section 5. The Aftermath Mathematics. Your reaction time just became as useful as a fire extinguisher in a nuclear explosion. Here's the brutal biology. Human decision-making under extreme stress operates through neurological pathways that evolved for predator evasion in open environments where flight distance equals survival time. Transfer that firmware to interior residential architecture with multiple rooms, narrow hallways, and furniture obstacles, and you've essentially performed surgery on escape options without anesthesia, and every advantage you think you have starts hemorrhaging simultaneously. The timeline is clinically precise. Second 0, your door breaches or you open it voluntarily. Seconds 1 through 4, threat enters your physical space. Your amygdala floods your system with adrenaline, causing time dilation where everything feels slower, but your actual motor response remains limited by muscle contraction speed and neurological signal propagation. Seconds 5 through 8, you're still in the cognitive processing phase trying to determine threat level, appropriate response, and whether this is actually happening. Seconds 9 through 15, physical confrontation is occurring whether you finish processing or not, and there you are. learning that action movies lied about how much time you have to formulate clever responses, about to discover that violence happens at the speed of physics, not the speed of thought. Congratulations, you just became a demonstration of why the OODA loop collapses when observation and orientation take longer than the opponent's decision and action phases. Hour 6 of your hospital stay, assuming you made it to a hospital. Statistical analysis from Department of Justice victimization studies shows that home invasion victims have an average of 11.7 seconds between initial confrontation and physical assault. That's not time to implement a defense strategy. That's barely time to understand you need a defense strategy. Your martial arts training from that 6-week course in 2019, irrelevant. Your concealed carry permit and the handgun that's locked in a safe in your bedroom upstairs, irrelevant. Your security system that's currently wailing an alarm that will summon police in 8 to 12 minutes, extremely irrelevant. You're operating on biological reaction time versus practiced aggression, and practice beats biology every single time. Most people assume they'll fight back effectively when threatened because action movies show heroes implementing tactical solutions under pressure after witty one-liners. Reality check. The physiological response to sudden violent confrontation includes tunnel vision that reduces peripheral awareness by 70%, auditory exclusion that makes you functionally deaf to anything except the immediate threat, fine motor skill degradation that makes weapon manipulation or phone dialing nearly impossible, and gross motor strength reduction due to vasoconstriction and muscle tension. You're not operating at 100% capacity. You're operating at maybe 30% capacity of what you could do during calm practice conditions. Your opponent isn't experiencing the same degradation because they initiated the encounter and are operating on practiced aggression protocols. But here's what the self-defense instructors don't tell you. The real killer isn't inadequate fighting skills, it's inadequate distance before the fight starts. Every foot of distance between you and a threat equals approximately 0.3 seconds of reaction time at average human running speed. 3 feet, 1 second, 10 feet, 3 seconds, 20 feet, 6 seconds. Those numbers represent the difference between maybe I can do something and I'm already in grappling range with someone who initiated violence while I was still trying to understand the situation. The winner of violent encounters isn't the toughest or the most skilled, it's the one who had more time to implement their strategy, and time is purchased with distance. You know how in John Wick, he's constantly creating distance and using environmental barriers to separate himself from multiple attackers so he can engage them sequentially instead of simultaneously? Yeah, that's cute. Until you realize that John Wick is a fictional character played by an actor who rehearsed those sequences for weeks with stunt coordinators in a controlled environment, and you're a real person in pajamas who just woke up 2 minutes ago. Reality check. The tactical movement patterns that keep John Wick alive would keep you alive too, except you don't know them, haven't practiced them, and are currently standing in the worst possible position, close to the entry point with no barriers between you and the threat. The film makes tactical spacing look cool and stylish. Real life makes tactical spacing look like the difference between surviving and becoming a case study. First, acknowledge reality. If someone unauthorized is inside your home, you have already lost a tactical advantage, and regaining advantage requires either law enforcement intervention or creating sufficient distance and barriers to implement effective response. Your priority hierarchy is not fight, flight, or freeze. Your priority hierarchy is distance, barriers, communication, and help, in that order. Immediately move away from the entry point. Every step you take away from the threat is worth exponentially more than any step you take toward engagement. The scientific method solution works because of time-distance barrier mathematics. Create distance. Move toward the furthest point in your home from the entry location. Install barriers. Close and lock every door between you and the threat. Each locked door adds 2 to 8 seconds of breach time, even with inferior locks. Communicate. Use those seconds to complete a 911 call with address, situation description, and your barricaded location. Help is en route. Your job is to survive until help arrives. You're not Rambo. You're a civilian using architecture and law enforcement as a force multiplier. No ability to create distance because you're already close to the threat? Fine. Aggression becomes mandatory, but not in the way action movies portray it. You're not fighting to win. You're fighting to create separation so you can run. Target vulnerable areas, eyes, throat, groin. Use any object as an improvised weapon, lamps, chairs, fire extinguishers, kitchen items. Your goal is pain compliance and disorientation sufficient to create a 3-second window where you can run. Then you run. You don't stay to see if they're down. You don't try to restrain them. You run to the nearest exit or the nearest room with a locking door, whichever provides faster barrier establishment. But here's the survival hack nobody talks about. Pre-staged improvised weapons in strategic locations throughout your home. Not tactical tomahawks that require explanation to law enforcement. Simple items that serve dual purposes. A heavy flashlight by your bed that's also an impact tool, a fire extinguisher that's also a blinding agent and a striking weapon, a baseball bat near your back door that's also legitimate sporting equipment. Statistical analysis shows that victims who use any weapon during home invasion have injury rates 30% lower than victims who rely on unarmed defense. You're not arming yourself for combat. You're creating options that didn't exist when your best weapon was harsh language and flailing. Priority hierarchy for response after unauthorized entry. 1. Create maximum distance from threat immediately. 2. Establish locked barriers between you and threat. 3. Complete 911 call with specific location and situation. 4. Arm yourself with any available improvised weapon. 5. Barricade in a room with single entry point and wait for police. 6. Engage physically only if cornered with no escape route. 7. Never assume you can talk someone down or reason with them. Violence is a language you don't speak fluently, and trying to negotiate during the grammar lesson gets you killed. The mathematics are evolutionary. Predators win through surprise and aggression. Prey survives through detection and evasion. You're prey in this equation. Accept it. Use it. Your evolutionary advantage isn't fighting capability. It's knowing when to run and where to run and how to make running take longer for them than it takes for help to arrive. But distance and barriers and improvised weapons are just the tactical band-aids. The real horror is understanding that all of this was preventable if you'd done one thing differently. Section 6. The Prevention Protocol. Your daytime complacency just became as useful as a smoke detector, with dead batteries complaining about dead batteries. Here's why. Security isn't an event, it's a protocol. The difference between people who survive home invasions and people who become statistics isn't what they do at 2 a.m. when someone's at their door. It's what they did at 2 p.m. every day for months before that night ever happened. Remove proactive deterrence from residential security, and you've essentially performed surgery on prevention without anesthesia, and every tactical response you might implement becomes necessary because you failed at making tactical response unnecessary. The cascade is entirely preventable. 3 months before your 2 a.m. nightmare, someone drove through your neighborhood assessing target viability. They noted the house with no exterior lighting. They noted the house with overgrown shrubs providing concealment near entry points. They noted the house where occupants walk to their mailbox at the same time daily, establishing pattern of life intelligence. They noted the house where packages sat on the porch for hours, indicating single occupancy or extended absences. They noted the house with no visible security cameras, no alarm system signage, and unlocked side gates providing backyard access. And there you are, living your life assuming that bad things happen randomly to unlucky people, about to discover that you weren't unlucky, you were selected. Congratulations, you just learned that criminals operate like investors analyzing risk versus reward portfolios, and your house was the penny stock that promised high returns for minimal effort. Week -4 of your home invasion. You posted on Facebook about your upcoming 2-week vacation to Europe with photos of your packed suitcase and airline tickets clearly showing departure date. You tagged your location at the airport. You posted real-time vacation photos showing you're currently 4,000 miles away from your residence. Your neighbor agreed to collect your mail, but mail collection doesn't prevent the pile of Amazon packages accumulating on your porch because you forgot to pause deliveries. Your lights are on timers, but the timers follow the same pattern every night. Lights on at 6 p.m., off at 11 p.m. Creating a rhythm that signals automation rather than occupancy. Studies from convicted burglars interviewed for criminology research show that 78% specifically monitor social media for vacation announcements, and 92% can identify occupied versus unoccupied residences within 30 seconds of observation based on subtle indicators that homeowners never consider. Most people think security is something you activate when you feel threatened, like turning on a security system when you hear noises. Reality check. Security is something you maintain constantly precisely because you can't predict when threat assessment becomes threat response. You don't wear a seatbelt only when you see an impending accident. You wear it continuously because accidents happen faster than reaction time permits response. Home security operates on identical principles. You're not preparing for known threats on scheduled dates. You're creating baseline deterrence that makes threat actors select different targets before they ever test your defenses. But here's what the security system salespeople don't tell you. The real killer isn't absence of security technology, it's absence of security thinking. You can install $5,000 worth of cameras, alarms, and reinforced doors, and still get targeted if your behavioral patterns signal vulnerability that outweighs hardware deterrence. The burglar doesn't care about your Ring doorbell if they've confirmed you're on vacation in Italy. The home invader doesn't care about your alarm system if they've watched you disable it every morning when you leave for work at 7:45 a.m. and determined that your response to alarm activation would take at least 4 minutes from their observed parking location. You know how in the town the bank robbers spend weeks surveilling their targets, studying guard patterns, camera positions, response times, and employee schedules before they ever attempt a robbery? Real-life home invasion planning is actually more thorough because the consequences for failure are immediate rather than merely legal. Reality check. Professional criminals treat target selection like graduate-level research projects. They're not kicking in random doors hoping for the best. They're selecting doors attached to houses occupied by people who telegraph their routines, their absences, their security measures, and their response capabilities through observable behavior patterns. The film makes it look like complex organized crime requiring elaborate planning. Real life makes it look like anyone with 2 weeks of evening drives through your neighborhood and a notebook. First, acknowledge reality. Every security failure is a prevention failure that occurred weeks or months before the security failure manifested as a physical threat. You're not securing your home against tonight's potential break-in. You're securing your home against becoming a target for break-in assessment in the first place. The goal isn't better response. The goal is no response necessary because nobody tested your response in the first place. The scientific method solution works because of deterrence theory and rational choice criminology. Criminals are not random chaos agents. They're rational actors making cost-benefit analyses. Increase perceived cost, decrease perceived benefit. Make your residents appear to be higher effort, higher risk, and lower reward than surrounding alternatives. Install visible security measures, cameras, motion lights, alarm signage, reinforced doors. Eliminate concealment opportunities, trim vegetation, maintain exterior lighting, remove objects that could be used as climbing aids or concealment. Vary your patterns. Don't leave for work at exactly 7:45 a.m. every single day. Don't return at exactly 6:15 p.m. every evening. Random variation makes surveillance more time-consuming and less predictive. It's like the difference between scheduled medication and random drug testing. One is easy to circumvent through timing, the other requires constant vigilance. No budget for security technology? Fine. Focus on free behavioral changes that signal occupancy and awareness. Stop posting your location on social media in real time. Stop announcing vacations publicly. Stop establishing rigidly predictable routines. Keep exterior areas maintained and well lit using cheap solutions like solar-powered motion lights and basic landscaping. Most criminals operate on effort minimization principles. They're not testing every house sequentially. They're selecting the house that shows obvious vulnerability indicators. Remove the indicators. Remove the selection. But here's the survival hack nobody talks about. Community-level security is force multiplication that individual security cannot match. Know your neighbors. Establish communication protocols. Create overlapping observation where multiple households monitor shared areas. A neighborhood where residents know each other, communicate about suspicious activity, and maintain collective awareness is exponentially harder to surveil than a neighborhood where everyone's isolated behind closed doors and privacy fences. Statistical analysis shows that burglary rates in neighborhoods with active community watch programs are 26 to 35% lower than comparable neighborhoods without coordination. You're not building paranoid fortress communities. You're building social networks that function as distributed surveillance systems that cost nothing except occasional conversations. Priority hierarchy for preventative security. 1. Eliminate information leakage on social media and public platforms. 2. Install visible deterrence measures even if they're budget-tier solutions. 3. Vary behavioral patterns to prevent routine establishment. 4. Maintain property conditions that signal occupancy and awareness. 5. Establish neighbor communication and mutual observation protocols. 6. Upgrade physical security on doors, windows, and access points. 7. Consider professional security assessment to identify vulnerabilities you haven't recognized. 8. Never assume that nothing bad will happen because nothing bad has happened before. Darwin doesn't care about your historical safety record. Evolution operates on differential survival rates, and past performance does not guarantee future survival. The mathematics are predictive. Home invasions don't happen to random houses, they happen to selected houses where reconnaissance identified exploitable vulnerabilities. Every choice you make during daylight hours either increases or decreases the probability that someone makes you a target during darkness hours. Security isn't something you purchase, security is something you practice. And practice means doing the boring preventative work every single day when nothing's wrong so you don't have to do the emergency reactive work when everything's wrong.